My name is Paul. Who is amazing.
All right, oh, that is so echoey. Am I through another microphone or just the one on my computer? Oh, is it that I needed to mute my side? Oh, okay. Hi, y'all. So yeah, my name is Lisa and I work as Director of Major Exploration in the Academic Advising Center. And that's just sort of a fancy title to say that my program exists to help students figure out what they want to major in and help connect them to resources that will help them decide, whether that's, taking a class, working with other people on campus, really just having knowledge of all of the majors and programs that are available on campus. And we work a lot with first year students, but we also work with transfer students. And I've tried to gear this program pretty specifically to the transfer student experience, because choosing a major or being in a place where you're trying to explore majors when you're a transfer student is a very different thing than being a first year student, right? So yeah, to kick us off, let me get that meeting being recorded thing off of the screen there. I think I need to accept it. Got it. And then I'm going to start us with a little pop quiz. So how many transfer students do you think enter the University of Utah undeclared? If you pop it in the chat, Paul will read it to me. You can guess. There's no way you would have this information. So whatever you guess is just your guess.
30%.
We got a guess of 30? Okay, cool. All right, I'm going to work with that one. Read it out if any others come to me. But the answer is actually that 5%, only 5% of transfer students are undeclared at least fall census for that fall admit term. So 95% of our transfer students in those fall semesters have a pre-major or a fully declared major by the third week of classes. But how many transfer students will change their major at least once?
Awesome.
I'm gonna pull the chat over to me so I can even see it. Oh, this way, there we go.
%.
10%. All right. The answer is about 40%. And that's including with about a 6-year time frame. So students who started between 2010 and 2016. And it includes everyone regardless of graduation status. So about 40% of those transfer students with like 6 years of cohorts changed their major at least once. So that's a lot higher than the 5% who actually started as undeclared. And I would say that says if you're undecided, if you're exploring your options, considering making a change, you're in good company. There are a lot of students, more than the numbers actually look like, who are considering a major change or looking at their options as transfer students. So to kind of continue along with this, we have a few myth versus reality slides about what your major actually means in the overall scheme of things. So the first myth is my major is going to lead to my career. I'm not going to make you respond to me this time. I'm just going to say that a lot of our students have expressed this concern or this feeling that your major is going to be the biggest determining factor in what kind of a career path you end up pursuing after you graduate. And in this particular example, we used the major of Japanese and the kind of like direct sounding career of translator. Are there any other careers that you can think of for this major though? And I did kind of call on you at that point. I didn't call on you earlier, but now I'm putting it on you to potentially throw some other career ideas in the chat. And I can show you some examples as well. So we have diplomacy or civil service. We have teaching, health services, advertising, fashion, PR, film, publishing, museum work, working for airlines, ecotourism is possible, journalism, and then HR, law, or banking. And these examples that I just provided of jobs for a Japanese major all came from the What Can I Do with This Major website resource on the Career Center website. Just looking up the career options, or actually there's a website that's literally called What Can I Do with This Major? And if you look up the career options for a language major, all of these come up. The last one that I pulled up, banking, I actually used to advise in world languages. I had a student who majored in Japanese, and he ended up going into financial advising and banking. And the last I heard, which is a couple of years after graduation, he was working on the education side of Goldman Sachs, which is not at all what people think of when they think Japanese major. So that's just kind of one example to show that your major does not necessarily determine exactly where you're going to go with your career. And he got there, by the way, by pursuing internships, because internships of all kinds are open to all majors at the U and everywhere. So my next myth versus reality, we have 5 high-level executives in this slide. The majority of CEOs majored in business. What do you think? Yes or no? No. Yeah, because you can probably tell where I'm going with this. Michelle's like, she's on the same page here. So Steph also dropped, it looks like that website I was referring to into the chat there, if you're interested in looking at some of the career resources. So all of these people are pretty high level or C-suite executives at major companies. Rosalind Brewer there is the CEO of Walgreens right now, majored in chemistry, which I feel like we could make a connection. Walgreens is a pharmacy, chemistry, you could get there. But prior to this, she was actually with Starbucks, so a little bit different. Danielle Lee is the president of Warner Music and Artist Fan Experiences, and she majored in political science. Ed Catmull in the bottom there is actually a U grad, former president of Disney and Pixar, and majored in physics and computer science. Jen Wong is the current chief operating officer, so COO of Reddit, and majored in applied math. And the last one is my favorite, Whitney Wolf. She is the founder and CEO of Bumble and majored in international studies. So not even, we would think, remotely close to necessarily business or app development, not computer science, not even like psychology or human relationships, but international studies, and still ended up founding a super, super popular app for dating. So again, business is a really common pathway that students want to go toward. And I think that's because we know everything is a business, right? That's a little bit cynical, but kind of true. So, so many things are business. So it seems like we should just major in business. But in reality, because we're all working with different businesses, all kinds of different majors can lead you to high level positions within all kinds of different businesses. So made the point that most students will change their major at least once. Your major doesn't really need to be directly tied to your career. So then how do you engage in major exploration at the U if that's something that you're looking for? So on the right here, there's a flowchart of core components for choosing a major. We break it down into 3 main categories. So we have exploring occupations, exploring majors, and exploring yourself. And as the title shows up there, you could also use this to consider adding a minor or a certificate to your degree. So this page can be really helpful, and we're going to visit it on the next slide that I have linked off here on the side. This is just I call it the majors page casually, but it includes all that minor and certificate info as well. So before I dive into the page, I'm curious to know, do I have any questions about what minors and certificates are, what the difference is, and why you might pursue them? And you can also unmute yourself anytime if you want to ask a question, but I've got the chat as well. None? Okay. I'm a little surprised because honestly, I think the difference between a minor and a certificate is a little bit confusing. And the truth is, there at this point in your education, while you're earning your bachelor degree, they're kind of a distinction without much of a difference. In order to earn a certificate, it's pretty much the same as earning a minor. You need to complete the courses as listed. You need to, work with the advisor for that minor or certificate to make sure that you stay on track. And they will either declare the minor or they will add you to the list of students earning that certificate. And that should be granted when you graduate with your degree. The difference that comes up sometimes, and maybe this is actually an important one for transfer students as you might be a little bit closer to graduation, is that many certificates can actually be earned independently of a degree, whereas minors have to be attached to a major. So you can only earn a minor while you're working on a major, but you could earn a certificate after you graduated, even if it's an undergraduate certificate. So that's a way that you can come back or continue on and kind of add skills if you want to, or even come back, a few years later, if you're looking at taking some courses and kind of want to ensure that it has some kind of like transcriptable designation, a certificate could be for that. So clicking off into this page really quickly, I wanted to show you because you can filter for these things individually. So if you're getting closer to graduation and you're like, okay, a minor is not an option for me, maybe you want to look at a certificate only, clicking that will quickly filter it down and show you all of the certificates that the U offers for undergraduate students. There are graduate certificates as well. Our area simply works primarily with undergraduate students, so our resource is currently for undergraduate programs. You can add the minors in there. If we're kind of coming back to the major decision-making question though, there's also this tab for major flexibility. And we added that specifically for transfer students actually, and students who are a little farther along in their degree, because what it comes down to sometimes when you've already got a little bit of credit done is how quickly can I actually move through this major and how flexible is it for me? So when we say major flexibility, what we're looking at is actually how many classes have to be done in a sequence. So some majors like engineering, architecture, art, they're going to come up as sequential majors because the classes just have to be done in a specific order and you can't rush that. You can't just take like all 5 of them at the same time. You have to do one at a time and it's going to take at least 5, 6, 7 semesters. So that's what we mean by a sequential major. And from that, you can kind of, I think, assume the rest. Moderately sequential is going to be right in the middle of that. There are a few courses that have to be done in order and have to be done 1 semester at a time, but not as many as our highly sequential ones. And flexible, what flexible means isn't that you can graduate with it in 1 semester or that it's the shortest major on campus necessarily. It's not a marker of the amount of credits required. It's a marker of whether you can take those courses all at the same time. Can you take 5 Asian studies courses in 1 semester to help you graduate a little bit faster? Yes, you could. Does this major force you to take a certain amount of semesters? Not necessarily, because the courses aren't sequenced in that way. So when you're looking at changing majors, and if you have a goal of graduating by a certain timeline, these flexible majors can be kind of useful to see what they'll what you could potentially get done a little bit more quickly than the requirements of a sequential major. The last little bit I'll add on here is that we've done some research and we know that transfer students complete minors and certificates at a lower rate than students who enter as first years. Of course, just because we know that doesn't mean we have the answers as to why, but my guess would be it's probably partly that people aren't talking about minors and certificates. There's not as many opportunities to hear about them as a transfer student because you're coming in a little bit later. And then the other may be that you are a bit closer to graduation and so get a little bit focused on finishing the major stuff. So I really wanted to highlight that in this conversation, that if you're looking for a way to kind of differentiate or add a little bit of variety to your degree, or with a certificate, if you might be interested in pursuing something that would go a bit past graduation, those options are out there, and any questions you have about them, advisors should be happy to talk to you and see how that might fit into your academic plan, that sort of thing. Coming back, the other resource that we have here for just looking at what majors are available is our catalog. I'm not going to go to the catalog. You can get to it from catalog.utah.edu. It's going to be a little bit less detailed than that majors page. That majors page does have quite a bit of narrative kind of description of what each of those programs are. Steph has put that helpfully into the chat for us. That's great. So you can go to the catalog page if you want to. The catalog is going to be a little bit more specific to just requirements, right? It's not really going to tell you what it is if you minor in anthropology, but it is going to tell you what you have to take if you minor in anthropology. So that's why we use both of those resources, because they give you a little bit more well-rounded idea of both the narrative of what it is and the exact requirements of what you'd have to do to complete it. Other things you could do to help you explore would include running a what if degree audit. And then, like I had talked about earlier, just speaking with the advisor for that major, that minor, that certificate, whatever you're interested in is a great way to go. All right, I'm going to bring us back to full screen here. So on our previous slide, I briefly went over this flow chart, and I meant to also add the rest of the presentation is kind of using this as a guideline. So we started with exploring majors, and that's the slide that we just covered. We're also going to talk a little bit about the exploring occupations and then exploring yourself in the rest of this presentation, just to give you a sense of where I'm going with all of this before we come into some decision making and how you might implement that. So since we already did our exploring majors using our resources with the majors page and the catalog, your next step will be some career exploration. So we partner with the Career and Professional Development Center all the time because, you know, we went over this a bit. The major and the career are not necessarily going to be a direct link. That doesn't mean that you don't want to explore your career options. We know you're probably still pretty curious about where this is all going to go. And want to make sure that it's going to go somewhere that works for you. So Steph has just dropped into the chat the careers website with student pathways. Our Career and Professional Development Center here at the U has virtual hours and in-person hours in their career studio. You can get help with resumes, cover letters, career exploration. So if you want to do this, but from the career side, then you can work with them. They also serve students for 2 years after graduating. But ideally, don't wait that long. The earlier you meet with them, the more help that they can provide. And their whole job is to be kind of up to date and in tune with what's going on in different industries, knowing that there are completely different practices for different careers. I know in education, submitting a cover letter is standard. We always ask for cover letters with our applications. I have learned that is not the case in every industry. So Career and Professional Development Center is the place that can kind of give you those answers and guide you, I think, properly in that stuff. To continue a little bit on the career exploration side of things, one of my favorite resources is ONET Online. So I put that up there. That's an easy one to find through Google. If you literally just search ONET, it should bring up the right website for you. But what this does, it's run by the Department of Labor. And so you're going to get some pretty up-to-date information on whatever career it is that you're looking for. And finding bright outlook careers, that puts a little sun next to it if it's considered a career that is going to experience a lot of growth. So it gives you an idea of where that may be going in the future. I did check academic advising. The closest you can find is listed under education, other. And I narrowed it down to the state of Utah. And I actually did think it was fairly accurate for a median salary. So if you're looking at salary information and wanting to get a sense of like really locally though, like at least within this state, what is this actually going to pay versus like what is some big national article saying that these people get paid? This website will have that information for you. I find it pretty helpful. On the other side, we have UGS 1950. So that is a 1-credit class that you can take with the Career Center. So if you're kind of the type of student that's like, I know I need to do this, but I am more likely to do it if I sign up for a class because then I have to be held accountable. This is a great way to do that. They offer, actually, I think their second semester or second half semester classes started on Monday. They teach in both first and second half in fall and spring. So it's really convenient. It's also an online class, so it shouldn't interfere with any of the other courses that you have to schedule. Again, just a great way to kind of get in touch with the Career and Professional Development Center and start actively doing some of that career exploration. And final plug, this can kind of build into a little sequence. They also have UGS 3950, job and internship search, 2 credit hours, upper division credit. If you realize you need a little bit more of that credit at the 3000 level or above to graduate, what a perfect way to kind of wrap up your degree by learning a little bit more about the ways to conduct job and internship searches and successfully apply to those. Of course, you can also do it right now if you're focusing more on the internship side of things and not necessarily looking to add more paid work either way. Okay, shifting gears, coming back to that flow chart that I was showing you before, this does require a little bit of audience participation. So we're going to do an exercise that's built around the idea of exploring yourself. And we're going to focus on values for this exercise. So I'm going to describe a job to you, and you should be able to raise your Zoom hand, I think, if you go to, what is it? I think reactions is what it's called, something like that. So raise your Zoom hand, and everyone in theory would start with their Zoom hand raised. And as I describe each feature of this job, you would keep that hand up if you're interested in taking it. But at any point, if I said something that makes you say, yeah, no, I'm not going to take this job, then you can put your hand down. Anyone? I don't see any hands raised. Am I right, Paul? Is it under? Thanks, Miranda. There we go. Okay, I've got a couple. Perfect. Thank you. I appreciate that. So we'll start with this job. Imagine that this is kind of like something right after graduation. This is your first job that you're offered after you finish with your bachelor degree. So the first stat, you would make close to $70,000 a year. Remember, of course, anytime once you decide you're not taking it, just put that hand down. You would need strong verbal communication skills. You could have a varied schedule that includes nights and weekends. It's not necessarily going to be consistent. You will spend a lot of time standing on your feet. Lost a couple hands, that's okay. You're going to sometimes deal with difficult people. And some people consider your workplace to be immoral. So we'll do two things. First, I'm going to ask you, what's the job and are you taking it? So it seemed like we had a few hands go down throughout it, which is totally understandable. Maybe one that was left. Do I have any job guesses? You can throw that in the chat, what you think it is. None? Okay, I think I've had a student guess it once, if that makes you feel better. And I was actually really surprised. I've gotten a lot of guesses that are like in the oil and gas industry. I have gotten nursing before, but I don't know why anyone would consider nursing to be immoral. So that feels like it is leading that direction until you get to the very end. The answer is a casino gaming supervisor. Oops. So the casino side of things is where the like some people might consider it to be immoral side comes in, right? Whether or not you actively intended it while you were going through it, when you put your hand down based on a piece of the description of the job, you were considering your values. You were using your values to guide your decision-making about whether or not you were going to take that job. So I think for someone, it was the varied schedule. I too am not a fan of a super varied schedule. I do like consistency. I like being able to plan around that. And I wouldn't really like it if my schedule were different every single week. And like sometimes I was working nights. That's not really my jam. So that's a value that you can use to guide you when you're making decisions. So overall, our values are our guiding principles of life. So they should be motivators. They can be inspirational, help us move forward with some purpose, definitely influence our decisions, actions, and behaviors. Huge piece is that they should transcend specific situations. It shouldn't be the situation that makes you decide whether you value something. If you truly value it, then it's going to be consistent no matter what scenario you're faced with. So between work and personal life, we also all get to choose them, right? We do not all have to value the exact same things. And if we did, we would not have people to fill all the different kinds of careers that exist out there in the world. How they develop, typically from our life experiences, I think they start when we're kids. We tend to adopt the values of those who have influenced us. I think we tend to adopt what is familiar to us. And then, of course, as we get older, we're going to explore and question, differentiate. By this age, you probably are fairly certain what your values are. So your steps in that would be kind of clarifying, what are they and what do they mean to me? One thing you can do just to get this started, if you just Google values or list of values, you'll find actually quite a few different things. Some are going to be like more personal values oriented. Some are going to be geared more toward careers and what you're looking for in the workplace. And any combination of these could be kind of helpful to just identify and put a name on what it is that you value. So you have that way to kind of keep it in mind. From there, you kind of start claiming them, verbalizing, standing up for your values, telling others what they are. And then the last one is taking action. It's committing, right? So when you decided you were not going to take that job, that was committing to whatever value it was that was informing that decision for you. So one other way to think about these would be to consider also what causes matter to you most. So thinking about societal issues, that's another perspective of values. We fortunately see a lot of students who have a big interest in the outdoors and a big interest in environmental issues. They value the environment, they value public lands, things like that. And so if they had $1 million to donate to any kind of social organization, then they might go to like the National Park Foundation or something like that, right? That can really tell you what type of work might be really important to you. And it also gets at your interests as well as your values. So as far as what relevance this plays, I think, again, if you're able to look up a list of them and start really clarifying what matters to you, you can use that in a career context if you're more in the career exploration phase. You can look at more social values and social issues if you're more in a major exploration phase, and that can help kind of inform it. But even with the career stuff, sometimes people find that useful to help work backwards, right? So you can kind of go figure out the job, work backwards, and figure out, what does my major, do I feel like that's going to help me in that area? Probably the answer is yes. So moving from values, our last step is going to be decision-making strategies. And in this one, I'm still going to want you to reflect as we get to a certain point. Think about the different contexts, the situations. Maybe think of a big decision that you had to make recently. That might be major exploration, but it could also be something that's completely unrelated to education entirely. For me, like probably my biggest decision recently was buying a house. These strategies still apply to how we make these big decisions. So keep that in mind as we're going through them, and try to reflect on times where you feel like you have used one of these strategies. So first one is procrastinating. And we all procrastinate. Sometimes maybe because we're like looking for more information. Maybe we're just putting off the decision. We just don't want to make it yet. Then we have impulsive. I think taking the first choice that seems reasonable. This is a great strategy to use when it's something like, say, what are you going to have for dinner? We often get very impulsive about that, right? We don't really need to like collect that much information. Then we have what's like kind of the opposite, I think, with agonizing. I've invested so much time and thought into this decision. I'm overwhelmed and I can't decide. Like I've collected so much information. I don't even know how to sort through it and where to go from here. Compliance. We've all done this at some point. I think, it's better if we just kind of follow a path that somebody else has suggested would be good for us. Usually somebody in a position of maybe some kind of authority or that we trust. It could also be, like I said, societal pressure. A lot of pre-med students think that they have to major in biology. We could reflect on maybe why that is, what kind of social influence there is. We see a lot of students talking about computer science, sometimes based on their own interest, sometimes because they've just heard it's a good thing to major in. Like literally our social surroundings, all of our, I don't know, media and things like that have contributed to that idea. Then we have intuitive, making a decision when it feels right, trying to decide with your heart, not really bringing your head into it. If I were to relate this more to choosing a major, I think it would be when students are looking for a major to feel perfect. So they're looking for like, has to just like feel perfect. But sometimes school is hard and it's work. And we look at a list of courses and a list of courses is never going to look perfect. It's going to look like work. So our last strategy is planful. And that is making a decision based on an orderly, kind of more rational process. We're going to bring in information and reflection. We're going to use thinking and feeling and try to balance those things into creating that planful or thoughtful decision. And ideally, that's how you make most of the big decisions in your life. So if I were going back to buying a house, like, yeah, you want one that feels right, but you also want to have used, a lot of informational knowledge and things like that. You want to be collecting info on the neighborhood, on, I don't know, all kinds of things, right? The numbers. So you want to balance that thinking and feeling and really making big decisions. So this slide, and we're coming pretty close to the end here, is just meant for you to think about those different types and ask yourself, how have you been approaching choosing a major? Or if you're confident in your major, how have you been approaching career exploration? And which one of these strategies, which one has it been? It might be more than one of them. Sometimes it's a balance. I want you to just kind of reflect on that. I'm not going to force you to tell me or to tell the group necessarily how you've been approaching these things, but think about if you have been using a different strategy, something that was maybe a little bit more compliant or even procrastinator, what kind of strategy would you like to use? Obviously, from our perspective, we're going to encourage using that planful decision making. And we said it was a balance of thinking and feeling and all of that. But I want to kind of outline what it would really look like to make a planful decision. So your first step would be to define your goal. What exactly are you working on here? To assess your alternatives, what options do you have? Gather information on all of those. Assess your outcomes and consequences. Establish a plan of action, and then refine your goal or objective. We've listed these as if they're 6 very linear steps, but in reality, they're not necessarily that linear. They can be very, you can flow kind of back and forth between them into different areas, kind of, going through one of the stages, maybe through gathering information already leads you back to like, whoa, I need some more alternatives. Like I got all this info and it's not looking good. Or maybe it's assessing the outcomes and consequences that leads you to think like, I don't even really have that much of a pro-con list. I probably need more info. So it really is more of a process than a linear path to planful decision making. But ultimately, we hope that at some point you would get to the point where you are able to establish that plan, and refining the goal might mean that you've completed it and you're moving on to a new goal potentially. So I wanted to leave you with some transfer specific resources. I've thrown our website on there, which is advising.utah.edu/majors, or you can get to us really quickly, just majors.utah.edu. That events page, though, we have a major changing workshop on November 2nd. It's actually completely different information than we covered today. So we're looking more at what it would mean if you did change a major a little bit later in the game. Some of the things that hold people back from doing that, and some things we would encourage you to consider if you're thinking about changing your major, or you're feeling like you're not in the right fit. So we'd love to see you there if that happens to apply to you. And Steph has dropped that into the chat as well, so you can easily follow that link and register for the Zoom. Obviously, you also have transfer.utah.edu research, or UROP is our undergraduate research program. ASUU is great to get involved with, the Benyon Center. Handshake is the platform that Career Services uses. Their appointments are on there, as well as, you know, U of U specific job boards, all of those resources. We know that one of the challenging aspects of being a transfer student is getting involved and building your university resume in the shorter amount of time that you're here. And that's kind of why I've listed all of these things, just to remind you that they're out there. You probably already know. But if you don't know, and you're like, why is she assuming that? The Benyon Center is our volunteer service coordinators. And Hinckley is actually about Hinckley internships. Beyond that, as Steph just posted in the chat as well, we're going to have a major expo event in spring. We will have updated details about that soon. Our major expo brings together actually representatives from a lot of these resources, as well as an advisor for every major, minor, and certificate on campus. We try to get every undergraduate program to have representation all together in the Union Ballroom, so that if you just want to drop by and start comparing and contrasting things, if you want to talk to people without the barrier of making an appointment, that is a great event to attend. So lots of information, and I know on Zoom it can really easily become an info dump. Are there any questions that I can address, thoughts, anything like that? Oh, thank you. Awesome. So we've got the resources, student resources page, so you can actually get some direct links to those things that I've kind of suggested here. All of those too, I talked about them as like resume builders, and sure, they are that. They can also be ways to explore your options too. A lot of times students find different programs that they want to get involved with, like, or different minors that they want to declare, whatever certificates, through getting involved with something like the Benyon Center or undergraduate research. So these are exploratory activities as well as resume building activities. There's a lot of value to them. And they do usually have short-term options as well as longer term. So if you're feeling like, I work, I do all this other stuff, like, I don't know when you think I've got time for this, there are typically some really, you know, lower commitment stuff that you can find on their websites. Awesome. Yeah. And it looks like a bunch of those offices have done other transfer workshops that you can view. Okay. All right. Well, we went quickly today, but that is all I have for you. I'm going to hang out here in case you have any other questions. But thank you for attending. Thank you for raising your hands when I awkwardly waited and made you do it. I appreciate that. I hope you have an awesome rest of your day, and you can always find me on the advising website if you have any specific questions that you want to send over my email in the chat. There we go. And otherwise, have a wonderful rest of your day.